And now we're going to turn to news from around the globe, where today, just one day after the 13th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and at a time when terror concerns remain on the radar of government officials and Americans due to the growing violence caused overseas by ISIL, Pentagon officials are confirming that the U.S. is in fact at war with the terror network. And Congressman Eliot Engel is a ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He's kind enough to join us now with more on this. Congressman, as always, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
My pleasure, Richard.
Well, maybe it was just language, but there did seem to be a divide between the White House and what Secretary Kerry had to say, whether or not we were at war with ISIS. To you, was it just, tomato, tomato? Was there a significant difference here in how we perceive the threat of ISIS to American interests, let alone what they're doing overseas?
Well, I think what the president was doing was graphically stating what's really a fact. We are at war with them, and if anyone doesn't believe it, all you have to do is watch those two horrific videos of those two poor Americans being beheaded for no other reason than they were at the wrong place at the wrong time and happened to be Americans. ISIS is a very dangerous cancer that has to be removed because they, if we allow them to have a safe haven in Iraq and Syria, the way 13 years ago we unfortunately allowed the Taliban to facilitate Al-Qaeda to have a safe haven and free reign in a no man's land in Afghanistan, we will find the same kind of horrific terrorist attacks against our homeland, the homeland of our allies in Europe and the Middle East. And I think that it's clear that ISIS is on the move and that they've essentially obliterated the lines between Syria and Iraq.
What about the argument that many will make, Congressman, that say this sure feels like mission creep here, that if we're not careful, once again, we're going to see here this thing turn into something more than it was intended. Can it just really be airstrikes? I know you're so generous, and you say you got to have 2 brigades there on the ground as well. Does this end really just with airstrikes and a very minimal deployment of some additional troops there, or doesn't this potentially turn into something much more?
Well, we hope it doesn't, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't, but we're going into really the unknown. We think that there needs to be no U.S. boots on the ground because we do have boots on the ground with the Kurds. There are boots on the ground with the Iraqis. I know they're not the best fighting force in the world, but they are better than what they've shown. And as part of the president's plan, he wants to aid and equip people in Syria, Free Syria Army and other well-vetted Syrian rebels, to be able to fight on the ground in Syria. It's true that in the future there may have to be some special forces down the line, but this is not anything like a ground invasion of Iraq that we saw back in 2002, 2003. This is not taking over a country or trying to affect political change. And for anyone who doubts whether this is in the U.S. national interest, just look and see what ISIS or ISIL or IS, whatever they call themselves, have done in the past. They have murdered thousands upon thousands of people for simply being the wrong kind of people, the wrong religion, the wrong place. They're brutal. They murder women and children. They behead people. This is not something with which we can take lightly, and I agree with virtually everything that President Obama said the other night.
Do you agree that the president doesn't have to go to Congress but should? Where do you think his powers start and stop? And do you think, given the way that Washington is, and you know far better than any of us, if the president does go to Congress, he's going to get the answer he hopes to hear?
Well, we're really talking about 2 separate things. The president believes that he does not have to go to Congress to continue the airstrikes and the things that we've been doing in the air in Iraq, and even if he moves that to Syria. The president feels that he does have to go to Congress for this program to train and equip the well-vetted Syrian rebels. The question is, how does he come to Congress? And right now, there's talk about attaching the money for that to what's called a CR, or a continuing resolution, which funds the government, which keeps it open, which we were supposed to have done yesterday. It's been postponed for a week while we figure out the best way to do that. There are a lot of people who object to it because they feel that it should be a clean money for an event like this, not simply attaching it to a CR. My own view is that we need to get started on this. We should have been doing it a year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Better late than never. If we wait another 3 or 4 months and have a full-fledged political debate, I think it hurts us in the long run, because it's 3 or 4 months that ISIS is able to do whatever it wants to do with impunity. The second issue is whether the president still has the AUMF in the authority to go to war in Iraq, and he claims that he does, stemming from the authority that was given to President Bush. There are a lot of people, myself included, who are skeptical of that. But right now, I think it's important that we pass the monies in the CR or any way we can do it, as fast as we can do it, so we can start the training of these Syrian rebels.
And finally, Congressman, while I know you don't have anything to worry about between now and November about getting reelected, a lot of your fellow Democrats, however, do. Consensus is it'd be a surprise at this point if Democrats hold the Senate. What's your sense from talking to some of your colleagues on the Hill? How bad a fall does it look like for Democrats?
Well, it's interesting. You know, if you ask the question in the polls that I've seen, where you take registered voters and it says which party will you be voting for in November, most say Democrats. It's about a 3-point difference, but the majority who have responded between Democrats and Republicans say Democrats. If you ask people who are likely voters, then a couple of points more say Republican. So I wouldn't. I know what the general thinking is, that somehow or other this is going to be a big Republican year. I'm not so sure. I think Republicans do have the wind to their backs, but I think, frankly, what's happening now with ISIS and the president's leadership, we have a few weeks to Election Day. I wouldn't write the Democrats off just yet.
And on that note, here we'll wrap it up. Congressman Engel, as always, thank you so much. All right, everybody, when we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to take a look at news making headlines in Hudson Valley when we return.